Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am your host, Vortex, from MobileMusicPro.com, your home for mobile music production. And if you are new to the channel, what we do here is we try to create weekly videos teaching people how to produce music. So if you do want to help us out on our mission, make sure to smash those likes, subscribe, and share out the show. Now today's video is a second part in an ongoing series where we're diving into the fundamentals of music production by teaching you how to use the Cubasis 3 basic plugins. In the previous video that we just released, we covered the Studio EQ, but in today's video, we will be covering the compressor plugin. Cubasis 3's stock compressor plugin does come with all of the things that you need to shape your sound, and in addition to that, it comes with some very professional sounding presets to get you guys up and running as soon as possible. Now, in short, what a compressor does is it simply lowers the louder sounds down to the volume of the more quieter sounds, giving you an overall much more balanced signal. And how much compression you do end up applying does very much depend on what type of instrument that you're applying it to and in what type of genre. The biggest mistake that I see new producers make with compression is they usually end up applying way too much, which ends up just completely squashing their sound, sort of removing all the transients that made the track great in the first place. So we'll make sure to explain all the lingo such as attack, release, threshold, and more to get you up and running with a compressor as quickly as possible. Alright, now with that intro aside, let's get right into showing you how to use the stock compressor inside of Cubasis 3. Hello and welcome everybody. We are wishing you the happiest of the happiest from Mobile Music Pro to wherever you are in the world. And we just wanted to remind you that the knowledge we'll be talking about in today's video can be applied to just about any compressor in just about any DAW. The compressor plugin can be used for a wide variety of different tasks, such as gluing the mix together on the master channel, or used to create the technique known as sidechaining, a very popular effect that is in pretty much every single genre today. There's actually many different kinds of compressors with many different ways to use them, but in today's video we're just going to be focusing on the stock compressor inside Cubasis, talking about just general compression. So let's now go ahead and get started and pull up our stock compressor plugin inside Cubasis 3. Now what you're looking at here is a Cubasis 3 project that we created earlier today that is pretty much just a simple 8-bar loop. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first, let's go ahead and pull up our compressor. So to do that, we'll go ahead and select the track that we want to pull up our compressor on, which in our case here is track 2 at the bottom. And then we'll tap on the Insert Effects tab on the far left-hand side. If that is minimized, make sure to maximize that by tapping on the arrow once again. So we'll tap on Insert Effects, and by default here you will see the two effects that Steinberg puts in here, which is the Channel Strip and the EQ. We spoke about the Studio EQ in the previous video, so if you want to know more about that, make sure to check that out. But for now, we're going to go ahead and remove these plugins, so let's tap on them, tap on Internal Effects, and then tap on None, and let's remove our Studio EQ as well. And now we have no insert effects left, so let's go ahead and add our compressor. So we'll go ahead and tap to add effect, and then we'll go down to our internal effects, scroll down, and tap on compressor. Now let's just make this a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing here. And we'll scroll down to the bottom here again, so we can see our track. And let's make sure we're on the stock preset here. There we go. We are on the default preset. So now let's get into what all of these different sliders and all of these different labels mean. This is a pretty standard compressor, and you're going to find pretty much all of these different sliders and labels on pretty much any compressor that you encounter. So once again, the knowledge that you learned from this compressor video can be applied to any compressor in pretty much any DAW. We're going to go from left to right here. So starting from the far left-hand side, we have our threshold slider. Now the threshold controls the point at which the compressor begins to activate. So what that means is that anything above this threshold will start getting compressed. And now moving on to the center of the screen, we have the level and reduction meters. So the in level will actually show you how many dB you're pushing into the compressor, and the reduction level will show you how much dB the compressor is actually reducing. Now, if you do end up reducing too much, you'll of course have to make that up over here at the far right hand side with the output knob. This is your output gain and is designed to make up for any level that you lose when you try to compress your signal, again making those loud sounds down to the medium quiet sounds. And we can show you that in action real quick, so we'll go ahead and set this to 0 dB again so that nothing will be compressed, and we'll slowly bring that in so you can see the level being compressed. So you can see our in-level meter there working just fine. And now what we're going to do is lower the threshold so that we can begin compressing this sound. And what you'll see is the reduction meter start to activate. So let's do that now. Alright, perfect. So, as you saw there, the reduction started to kick in because we did start to compress the signal, which again was beginning to reduce those louder sounds down to the more quieter sounding level, with the actual amount of dB being reduced shown right here on the far right hand side. So now let's set our threshold back to the default setting here by double tapping on that. And now what's left to explain here is the ratio, attack, and release. Now this ratio setting here is going to determine how much volume actually gets reduced. The higher the ratio, the more the sound gets compressed. So for example, if we were to drag our ratio over here down to 1:2, we can see that on the far right hand side. It says 1:2 here, a 1:2 ratio. This means that for every 1 dB of sound, we're going to reduce the dB by 2. And then if we were to drag this, say for example, over to 1:5, a 1:5 ratio, that means that for every 1 dB, we're going to reduce the signal by 5 dB. So again, the more you start dragging that over to the right, the more compression will get applied, and the more the volume will get reduced. And we'll show you what this actually does to the wave file in just a minute. So let's go back to the default here. The next setting is our attack setting over here, and what the attack means is that determines how fast the compressor actually activates. So what that means, if we were to reduce the attack speed here, that means that the compressor will go ahead and kick in right away, assuming the threshold level has been met, of course. Now, if you increase this attack, for example, going all the way over to the right, that means that as soon as the threshold gets met, the compressor will slowly come in instead of right away. Now, generally, kicks, snares, and vocals and so forth have a pretty fast attack ratio, where wind and string instruments such as pianos and violins tend to have much slower attack speeds. So for those, for example, you would drag this all the way to the right or somewhere in the middle, as opposed to all the way on the left-hand side for kicks, snares, and vocals. And we can quickly bring up a cheat sheet for you as well to help you better understand this. Now, just like our last video, these cheat sheets are really easy to find. All you have to do is Google compressor cheat sheet. Now, as we can see here, the bass, vocal, and rock all have pretty fast attack times, and generally have ratios around 2:1 to 4:1, with some makeup gains around 5 dB to 15 dB. So once again, the compression and the level of compression really depends on the instrument. Let's go ahead and pull up one more cheat sheet. The image seems to be cut off a little bit here on the left-hand side, but you should still be able to see what we're talking about here. So for example, if we go down to the piano and the strings, you can see they have higher ratios and much higher attack and release times. Again, with the kick and snare having very short attack and release times, from 5 ms to 15 ms for the attack and 50 ms to 200 ms for the release. But then our piano and strings have around 20 to 50 ms attack and 300 ms to a full second of release time. And again, you don't want to follow these rules absolutely perfectly to the T. You always want to make sure to use your ear and use what sounds best. So let's go ahead and go back to our compressor now in Cubasis 3. And the final setting that we have to talk about here is the release. Now the release will control how long it will take the compressor to disengage after the signal drops below a certain threshold. So for example, if you set this release all the way to the end, the compressor is going to stay on there for a while. It's going to hold on to those signals and those transients. But if we were to push this all the way to the left, then the compressor will release that signal pretty quickly. So that pretty much covers all the different controls and sliders on this compressor. We briefly covered the output, but once again we'll tell you what that is. Again, the whole point of the compressor is to reduce the very loud noises down to the same volume as the more quieter noises. So once you do that, you will have to make up gain after that to increase the volume of the signal that you just reduced. And that is what the makeup gain or output gain on the far right hand side of the screen is for. So now what we're going to do is we're going to give you a visual representation of what compression is doing to your signal. So what we're going to do is apply a light and then medium and then finally a heavy amount of compression so that you can both visually see what's happening and hopefully hear what compression is doing to the signal. So once again, we'll be working with that same loop that we just were. We have our compressor on here and we have the default preset. And what we're going to do is reduce this a little bit. We just want to apply a little bit of compression for now. So let's up our threshold here so barely any compression gets applied. We'll up our ratio here, maybe to 110 or so, a little bit high so that you can really see the peaks being reduced. And then the output we're going to leave at 0 because I don't want to have any additional output gain right now so that you can see the signal itself being squashed. So we'll go ahead and set this to 0 for now. So first, we're going to listen to what this sounds like. We're going to engage and disengage the plugin, and then we'll go ahead and freeze the track and see what that waveform looks like. So we'll start this now without the plugin engaged. Okay, so as you hopefully heard there, the compressed signal was a little bit quieter than the original signal because we are compressing that without any makeup gain. So now let's go ahead and freeze this track and see what our audio looks like. So we'll tap on the freeze track button and let's zoom in here a little bit so we can see what's going on. Now right away we can see a little bit of reduction in signal here. So if we look at the top, we can see that the top of the waveform is a little bit thicker, where if we look at the compressed signal, we can see it is a little bit smaller here. The entire body of the waveform here is not as tall and not as full as the signal above it. Now we've got this zoomed in here as much as we can, so apologies if you can't see this just yet, but you definitely will be able to see the differences once we apply more compression. And this time we're going to reduce our threshold so that more of the signal gets compressed. So let's go all the way down here, maybe -10 or 11 dB. That'll work. Let's increase our ratio even more, maybe to around 115, so that for every 1 dB we're reducing 15 dB. And again, with no makeup gain, the signal should be considerably less loud than the previous. So once again, let's go ahead and disengage the plugin, and we'll listen to what this sounds like. So we'll hit play, and then we'll engage and disengage the plugin. Alright, perfect. Hopefully you can start to hear some of those transients go missing and start to hear the signal sound a little bit more squashed, as we say in the business, than the original signal. So let's go ahead and freeze this track now and see what this looks like visually. We'll hit the freeze button. There we go. Now, right away, you can now really see a big difference here. So if you look at the size of this waveform right here, if you look at the size of both the left and the right channel, you can see that they are much, much larger than the compressed signal. You can tell here in this second waveform as well that this second waveform is much larger than the waveform on the compressed signal. So again, what we're doing is we're taking those high peaks and pushing them down to the more medium and quieter peaks. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to smash this signal to the extreme. We're going to show you what an extreme version of compression looks like. And there's really very few instances where you're going to apply this type of compression, with one of the main ones being something called parallel compression. And if you're curious on what that is, make sure to check out our video on the channel about that. So what we're going to do here is start out with our default preset as usual, and we're going to take down our output dB to 0, because we're not going to make up any gain here, so we can visually see what that looks like. And let's take our threshold all the way down here to something like 18 or 19 dB, so that we can really make sure to grab as much of the signal as possible. We're going to compress as much of the signal that we can. Let's grab our ratio and move that all the way to the right. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to be extremely reducing the signal here. So for every 1 dB, we're going to reduce that 1 dB 20 dB. Which again is really bringing those highs all the way down to the middle, and again what we call squashing the sound. We can leave the attack pretty low here again, as well as the release. This is mostly for demonstration purposes here. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and play this for you so you can hear what this sounds like. So we'll start out with the plugin off, and then we'll turn it back on as the sound plays. All right there, as you can see, the reduction was going crazy. The meter was going all the way almost to the left. You could barely hear the signal anymore because we reduced it so much, and we didn't have any output gain at all to bring that signal back up once we squashed it. So now visually, let's see what that looks like. We'll make sure the plugin is engaged so that when we freeze the track, the compressor is applied. We'll go ahead and then freeze the track. And there we go. We can have a pretty big contrast here now, folks. So as you can see here, the large wave file right here from the original is way, way, way bigger than our completely and entirely compressed and squashed signal that we have here. So a huge difference, again, completely squashing the signal. So we're taking all those loud noises and pushing them down right to the center. So hopefully that does give you a better idea of what compression is actually doing to your sound. Okay, so now what we're going to do is get into this loop. What we have here is compression applied on every single one of these tracks. And we're going to show you how we applied that compression and what that looks like. And then after that, we'll go ahead and play the loop. So first, if we look at our drum loop track and we tap on compressor, we'll tap on compressor and go to factory presets. You can see we're currently using the tape compression preset here. Because these are drums, we pretty much have everything set to be pretty fast here. So we have a fast attack and a fast release and a 1:4 ratio. Nothing too crazy, especially since this is a drum loop, where normally, of course, you'd process your kicks, snares, hats, and so forth, your individual drum elements, separately so that you can dial in that sound much better. But for the demonstration purposes, I think this will work just fine. So now let's move on to our bass track. We'll tap on our slap bass track and we'll tap on the compressor plugin. And for that, we are using the bass preset here. But again, a little bit adjusted here. So what I did is from the original bass, I then took down the output a little bit more, increased the threshold just a bit, and increased the release. So once again, nothing too crazy here. Now let's move on to our rhythm guitar. We'll tap on the track and then tap on compressor. And for this particular preset, I believe we started with the fast crush. Yes, we started with the fast crush preset, which is actually applying a decent amount of compression here. You can see the threshold is set to 18 dB, but in our attack and release, you can see that we're actually having the compressor barely touch our sound. We just use it really quick for the attack, and then we release it almost right away. And we're only reducing our volume by a little bit here, again with a 1:4 ratio. And just making up a little bit here, about 3.1 dB in gain. And finally, we'll move on to our piano track here, the keys track. We'll look on the compressor and go to the factory presets to see what we used. And yes, we used the strings and things preset, but we did modify the attack. And in fact, this threshold is set to a little bit high. I think I'm going to reduce that a little bit as well, just really quick as we're speaking here. There we go. Somewhere around 27 instead of 30. We have our ratio set pretty high here, again, because this is a key or a piano instrument. So we're going to set this to a 1:10 ratio. Kind of a fast attack because that's just the style of this particular piano, but we will have a long release time so that the compression can gently fade out with the piano reverb. Alright, so now let's listen to what this track sounds like. Alright, perfect. Now, let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like without any of the compressor plugins applied. Alright, we have removed all of the compressor plugins on this track, and now let's just give this a listen. Alright, right away you can hear some pretty strange problems here without compression. You can hear that our piano is just really loud, really out of whack because we were compressing that signal to be a little bit more in the mid-range, and now it's just super bright, taking up the whole track, and our guitar is awfully quiet. It's not quite as boosted as it was because we did actually end up boosting the output gain a little bit on that compressor. And the bass itself is not as full either, so pretty different and drastic difference from the original. So let's go ahead and enable the compressor and listen to that final loop one more time. Alright, we have enabled the compressor once more, and let's just take another listen to this loop. Alright, there we go, folks. As you can see, the compressor really isn't that difficult to get down. The main things you just have to worry about again is that attack and release, and of course the threshold, so that you know when the compressor can kick in. But as you saw as well, Steinberg has some fantastic and professional sounding presets that can help you get started right away. You could just tap on one of those that applies to your instrument and then start tweaking. This is a great way to hear what these settings actually do by playing with them and A/B'ing them back and forth, so that you can start to know when you need to apply compression in the future. Alright, if you are still rocking with us, then we can't thank you enough so much for being here. And we especially can't thank all the people watching these videos live every Wednesday and Saturday, helping us to build out our community. We hope that we did explain the fundamentals of compression properly to you guys, and hope that you can now understand how important compression is, whether you're applying it just very subtly or in an over-the-top method. Again, what type of compression you use and how much you actually end up applying is really dependent on the instrument and what type of genre that instrument is in. Remember to always use your ear and end up experimenting, folks, because the very best tracks are always usually made with a little bit of traditional knowledge mixed in with a little bit of rule breaking. And also, if you are interested in learning more about compression, then make sure to check out a couple of our other videos on this channel, such as how to use parallel compression. And just a reminder that we are currently in the middle of a brand new contest that is ending next Wednesday, November 25th, that is completely free to enter and where you can win one of 4 amazing prizes, with the grand prize being a brand new Arturia MIDI keyboard. So for details, prizes, and to find out how you can enter, make sure to visit mobilemusicpro.com/contest. And don't forget about our recently launched Discord chat, guys, where the conversation can go on long after our live streams and live premieres have ended. And as always, we have a ton more content coming, so if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing, make sure to check out our free mailing list at mobilemusicpro.com and make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And so, until next time, everybody, keep talking music, and we'll see you later. And if you are new to the channel, what we do here is we try to create weekly videos helping people how? Helping people how? No. So if you do want to help us out on our mission, oh man, I don't know, I'm extra smiley today. Okay, here we go. Let's get right into showing you how to use the compressor plugin inside Cubasis.